Today, as we celebrate Mother's Day, I think it's a really good thing that it happens on a Sunday because we can be in church. We can demonstrate our thankfulness to our moms by being there and by supporting her and her ministry, because really being a mom is a ministry as you're constantly discipling and training up and teaching and discerning the balance between helping a child stand on their own and when they need assistance, which is a tough balance. If we don't get that right as parents, we can cripple our children as they become adults if we either expect too much or we don't expect enough. And so today, as we consider what the Scriptures teach about a godly mother, I think we have to realize and recognize that we are in a post-Christian world, that the way that a mom ought to be is not necessarily communicated or esteemed or held up as important in our culture. And we can look at different movies and observe how moms are portrayed and how those values are portrayed. And in many cases, they're good things, but also in some cases, there are some not so good things. And so that puts us in a place as believers where we have to make a distinction between those things that are right and those things that are wrong. Now, it is certainly a reality that for some of us, we had a difficult relationship with our mother. So for some of us, perhaps you grew up without a mom. Perhaps you had a stepmom or someone else that fulfilled that role. And maybe you didn't, and so maybe this day is a struggle for you. Maybe you're a woman who is unable to have children or as many children as you wanted, or know someone who does, and so it can be a hard day for some. It can be a difficult day, and so I want us to be sensitive to that as well. But in Titus, there is a great verse, and that's kind of our key verse, and I want us to start out there. That displays and lays out for us and has in its essence three basic important emphasis for a great mom. And we want to explore those and look at those today. Let's begin there. It's Titus chapter 2, verses 3 through 5. In the same way, older women are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers, not addicted to wine. They are to teach what is good, so that they may encourage the young women to love their husbands and children, to be sensible, pure, good homemakers, submissive to their husbands, so that God's message will not be slandered. What a rich verse. So we have in this epistle, this letter that's gone out to the believers that are in Crete, and it's an admonishment. An admonishment is really just it's kind of like an encouragement, but also a challenge, kind of all rolled up into one. That's kind of a churchy word, admonish. I don't know why we use some of these churchy words sometimes, but it helps us to spell out a standard, and then we strive to meet that standard. And I say strive to meet because I don't think any of us fully 100% meet all the standards all the time. And so there's this process, there's this growing into the ideal of what we know we need to be. And so today, as we zero in on moms, I think it is important that we don't put too much, that our expectations are not too high, so that we become a discouragement, so that we become one that is not an encourager. And I know for me, I've struggled with both of those over my wife's tenure as a mother. She's been a parent for 16 years, and there's been times where I think I expected too much and was unreasonable in my expectations, and then I think there were probably some times where I should have communicated better and expected more and challenged her more. And so it's hard to find that. I'm so blessed because I was raised by such a wonderful mother. My wife is such a wonderful mother to my children. I feel a little bit guilty, I guess, in a sense, but nonetheless, these ideals have been lived out for me in my life, and I'm thankful for that. And so as we as we personalize this, as we take it in, for those of you who are moms, and of course even if your children are grown, that task really never ends. You know, how we parent certainly changes, and I'm kind of in the middle of that as my older children are becoming adults. I'm struggling with when to let go and when to let them make their own decisions, and so I know a little bit of the hardship of that. But then for them to be completely out of my home and raising families of their own, I'm sure that brings, again, its own challenges. But we are to never stop in that role. And in fact, it's interesting to me that verse 3 starts with older women. And this is really important because how do we learn to be a mom? Where does that come from? Well, it comes from older women, right? How they parent, how they display motherhood. So that's where it comes from. So that's why it's so important that the older ones live out and encourage the younger ones. And I've seen this played out in my girls. My girls' ages are 14, 12, and 6. My youngest will be 7 here in a month or two. And I can see how the younger girls, for better or worse, do things that the older girls do. And of course that their mom did and grandma and so on and so forth. So it's certainly a very valid and legitimate statement, I think, to begin there, because it's how we live. And for those of you who are young moms, how you raise your daughters, how you raise your sons, will dictate to some extent or to a large extent how they parent and how they become, in this case today, in our context, our moms. And so it's important. It's really important that we don't just be something. You know, I don't think in a sense you biologically become a mother when you become pregnant and conceive a child. But to really engage, to be a mother, that's an action. It doesn't really happen to you. It's something that you have to choose to do, to be a good mother. So let's look at these 3 elements. So there is the loving the husband element. That's the first thing we see. And sometimes we distance ourselves from that as moms. You know, we think about our children and what's best for them, and we forget sometimes that what's best for them is that we're good wives. So that's really important. Number 2, we love our children. I think that one's probably fairly obvious. And then number 3, one that we often overlook, is that we ourselves are to develop that Christian character. And those are really the 3 things that we want to zero in as we expand on this verse and as we see them here. Now, what are some examples that are given here? To be sensible. All right, so in other words, being sensible is someone who reasons things out, makes wise decisions, is a good steward of money, determines when we need this supply or not, determines when to apply discipline and when not to, determines what's nurturing and what needs to be more tough, thick-skinned. Sometimes you have to let kids fall down the stairs. Sometimes you have to let them burn themselves. I mean, not intentionally, of course, but sometimes that's the only way they're going to learn that there's a danger. That's the only way that they learn that we are protecting them from danger. It's through experience. It's through the existential thought process that kids go through. And of course, they don't recognize all that's happening. They're just acting and reacting to things. But it's through that process that they go through that they learn what's right and wrong, what's good and bad, what they should and shouldn't do, and how to handle things in different situations. And that women that become young adults and then adults that struggle, that can't function, that can't make those decisions, or that self-destruct emotionally, it's usually because those things were not lived out or taught to them as young women. And so they're crippled. That's why I used that word earlier, because it becomes an obstacle on top of all the other obstacles of adulthood that they have to overcome. Now let's talk about that word nurture for just a moment, because I think we see that word as, probably for me, I would say that to nurture is probably the premium task of a mom, to nurture. And it was interesting because I was reading, actually, Fox News had a detailed article on the millennial mom. Okay, now let's define who we're talking about. The millennial mom is really anyone that was born after 1980 that has children, which actually makes up, get this, 64% of moms in the United States today. Okay, Now that's something right there. All right, I was a little shocked. So we have this new culture of moms that are out there, and they are redefining that role. Sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad. Now I think what's fascinating is if you were a buster, okay, kind of the World War II era mom, or a boomer, which would be kind of 1960s, 70s, then you fulfilled one of two roles primarily. You were either the homemaker, and that was really the only option, and if you went to work, you were evil, bad, terrible, okay? Or then later, the boomers, if you were a stay-at-home mom, that was evil, bad, terrible, okay? So the thing like totally shifted. But millennial moms don't want to be in either one of those categories, or at least stereotyped in those categories. They don't want to be told, well, I should be a working mom or I should be a stay-at-home mom. But they look at the pragmatic side of life and see what's needed. And I find that's interesting, because we struggle as a culture, I think, to identify who we are, what we believe, what's important right now, and there's almost this cultural chaos. But through it all, whether you stay home, whether you work, whether you do a little bit of both, I think the important element is that a mom is to be one that nurtures, is one that cares for, that comforts, that soothes in a way that dads typically don't do that. I'm a little bit of kind of I like to think I'm somewhat sensitive, but generally I think I'm probably a little bit insensitive. I'm kind of the, okay, get up, get over it, you'll live, that kind of mentality, which I think children need at times. They can't just lay on the floor and cry their whole life. They need to kind of get a kick in the rear and get up and get going. But as my wife would say if she were here, and she's actually in the emergency room right now with my youngest daughter, who became injured. Her wrist was injured this morning, and so she's not able to be here at the moment. But I think she would say that it is important to comfort and nurture and encourage them at times. And she is a wonderful balance for me when I become a little bit too strict of a disciplinarian, whenever I become a little bit harsh and unforgiving and unrelenting. She kind of softens that. All right, I'm kind of the square, and she kind of shaves those rough edges off. And so it's really not just a mom thing necessarily, it's a team thing. And that's why I think it's so important as we look at this first item, love your husband, that marriage relationship is a priority. That has to be right, really, in order for the whole situation to be right. Let's look at Ephesians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is head of the wife, as also Christ is head of the church. He is the Savior of the body. Now let's think about that for a minute. All right, because I think we can misunderstand that pretty easily. We are a fairly traditional family. I feel like, in a sense, I'm kind of a buster living in a Generation X world. My wife and I made a decision together that she would be a stay-at-home mom, and so for more than a decade, that's how we lived since we got married in 1997 to pretty much till today. Although she has kind of gone back to school and gotten and owns a business and some other thing with the net. And does some sewing stuff, but she still, I think, probably would consider herself in the stay-at-home mom category. So, we've taken a pretty traditional route, and we've always seen things in a fairly traditional way. But I think one thing about this verse is important. It says that we are to love our wives like Christ loved the church. Well, let's think about that for a minute. What did that look like? What did Christ do for the church? He died for her, sacrificed, served, gave everything up for. So see, I think there is a team mentality that has to be applied to marriage. All right, there is not an either-or. There's not a captain and a vice captain, or a president and a vice president. There is a team effort, and that each person contributes something to that relationship together. And I think that's why when we get married, we talk about the two becoming one. Of course, that's from the Bible. The two shall become one flesh. Because really, it's in that union that we become whole. That I don't have that nurturing aspect alone, and so my wife makes up for that. Now, maybe you're single mom, single dad. And you know the hardships and the challenges of that I don't. And you have to kind of balance and be both of those today. And so I can't really speak to that or give you a lot of advice, having never experienced that. But I know that nurturing is an important part of that. And for those that are married, it is important, women or wives, that you love your husbands and serve them faithfully in just like it says here, in a sensible, pure, and submissive way, so that model will be displayed in front of your daughters, and they will see that. And I know I've said this repeatedly, and you're probably tired of hearing this, but children learn not from what you say so much as what you do. That's what children know, the difference between what you say and what you do. And I know that's hard. I know that's very accusatory, because I look at some of the things I do and I just go, oh, and even in my older children, I see ingrained in them some of my faults and some of my shortcomings. And it's too late to some extent for me to go back and change that. And so it's so important that when they're young, most kids, they develop all of their habits and ideologies and their feelings of fear and comfort and safety before they are 5 years old. I think that's truly amazing. That to the most extent, the best that scientists and psychologists and all those people that hopefully know what they're talking about can determine, it is about 80% at 5 years old. So those young years are important. How you talk to your wife, husbands. Wives, how you talk to your husband. How hard you work. I didn't really have time today because we had a lot in the service. There's kind of a funny video. In the video, there's this wife, and she's just going about her day and trying to get here and there and do all these things for the kids and changing diapers. And pretty soon the husband comes home and he just kind of goes to the couch and the TV and he's watching Duck Dynasty, and she's like, can you get up and do something and help a little bit? So I think we get stereotyped sometimes as men. And of course, if you're listening to that story, hopefully you realize the problem with that raising children is not a mom's responsibility alone, that it takes both, that it's a team effort, and that we need to work towards that. Let's look at this next word back in the Titus verse, pure. Pure. Now, pure is kind of like this. When you go to drink something, we're all a little bit particular. Well, except for moms who probably, drink a lot of floaties in their drinks because, the kids come along and they're drinking out of it too, and there's snot and all kinds of nasty things get in there, and then you just kind of get desensitized to it, and after a while, you're just like, you just drink it. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. But purity is really means without blemish, without something wrong with it. And it doesn't take a lot. If you have a nice fresh glass of water and it has like a dead bug in it, or a tiny, drop of urine, or I don't know, it's something gross. Immediately, you don't just look at that and go, oh, well, there's just a drop of yucky stuff in there, no big deal, right? You look at that and go, ooh, I'm not going to drink that, okay? Which I can tell by the expressions on many of your faces when I said that. You were really grossed out, and that's good. That was kind of the effect that I was going for, because when we are impure, that's what it's like. That's what it's like for our kids, that we teach them to accept a level of sin and a level of impurity in our lives. And so in what we see and what we hear and what we do and how we live, we need to be pure. And we need to do things that glorify God and please Him alone. Good homemakers. Now, this is not just talking about moms that have the privilege to be able to stay home and to work at home. In fact, in our house, we call it family managing. That's my wife's title, at least before she went to school. She was the family manager, and that was her job, not stay-at-home mom or whatever, which I have no problem with that title. I think it's a nice title, but sometimes misunderstood, because sometimes when you hear the word stay-at-home mom, what you picture is, a woman who her husband just left, and then she goes and sits on the couch, puts Passions or Days of Our Lives on the TV and eats bonbons. Okay, that's sometimes we get the... Now, I don't know about you. I have never talked to any stay-at-home mom that actually get to do that. So I'm not sure where that stereotype came from. But this verse, whether you work outside the home or you work outside the home and inside the home, we're to be good homemakers. And I think it is very, very overlooked in our culture, the importance of preparing the home. All right, preparing the home. Because the world is hostile. Everything is hostile, really. I mean, in life. Jobs, the world, it's just a there's people, there's just a lot of hostility. And the one place, that safe place, where there's comfort, where there's nurturing, where there is hopefully somewhat a lack of chaos, or at least moderated or organized chaos, and that place is the home. And it's the woman's responsibility to prepare it in a way and to keep it orderly and planned in a way that brings peace to the family. You know, it's amazing. I mean, my wife can completely set the tone for the home situation. Okay? The term, or the phrase, ain't mama happy, ain't nobody happy, definitely is a reality in our household. All right? If my wife is peaceful and everything has gone according to plan, and the house is clean, and we've got a meal being prepared, and I'm home from work on time, or I didn't get called away in an emergency or something, all is well, and everyone's happy, and we can deal with about any situation. But if she's in a hurry and dinner's not ready yet, and kids are screaming, and she's unhappy, I mean, the whole world is coming to an end, and it is in those moments that I fear for my life at times. That everything, that there's just this vortex of death that's just going to suck us all down, and we're all going to pay for the wickedness of our ways, which I'm sure is probably justified. And that's also has incidentally taught me to not leave my socks and other clothing items on the floor in the bedroom, but to put them safely and orderly in the clothes hamper. But that's not particularly important at this juncture. But preparing the home is an important thing. And being a good homemaker is something that takes practice. You know, I'm thrilled to hear that interest in schools, and we used to call it home ec, now it's called FACS, in case you didn't know that, but that the interest in that class and enrollment in that class is actually on the rise. Because women are interested to know how to raise children, how to cook, how to sew. I mean, good grief. I mean, sewing there for a while was almost extinct. When my wife first started sewing, it was really before it became popular again. And none of her friends sewed. And, just the whole idea of a woman sewing and there in the late 1990s, I mean, was just really unusual. And so she was, and that was before YouTube and all these other things. So, my mom and her mom and other people were, of course, her mom didn't really sew very much, but, trying to learn all that. And it was amazing how some of those things that used to be the pinnacle, the foundation of a mother's responsibility had gotten lost. Now I think there's been a resurgence of that as millennial moms have kind of broken the mold and not wanting to be defined in a certain category. A lot of these things are bad. I mean, even cooking from scratch is popular again. I mean, which is great because I love to eat it when it's made from scratch. Well, let's turn and look at loving children. And I know we have a lot of time, and we could spend a very, very long time on these. But let's talk about this for a moment. Proverbs 23, 13 and 14 says this: "Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you punish him or her with a rod, they will not die. Punish him with a rod and save his soul from death." See, discipline is a sign of love. All right, and I'm going to get real serious for just a minute, because I would say to you millennial moms, one of the things that you guys struggle with the most is applying proper discipline. That you've been told or taught or seen on TV that spanking your child or making them stand in the corner or making them wait before they buy something, and that making them earn the money before you buy it those are bad things. You've been taught that. But I would like to suggest to you that in fact those are good things. Those are things that protect and care for your child in a way that letting them just do whatever they want to do damages them. And I think that's easier for me to see. Having raised 5 children, I can definitely see the things that I did not discipline my children for that I should have. It is a detriment to them now. But the things that I disciplined them for, that they learned, are a blessing to them now. And if we want these children to grow up and be responsible, God-fearing adults, which that's the goal, all right? It's not to keep them children forever, but the goal is to train them up so that they can be independent, make wise decisions, keep a job, be able to make food and keep a home and all those things. They have to become disciplined. In fact, that's why we say, when we're talking about working out or eating well, or we're talking about learning to do a sport or something like that, we use that word discipline because that's what it takes to achieve excellence. So we have to be disciplined. We have to be self-controlled. We have to learn to endure things when they're hard. And if we never experience hardship as children, wow, our growth is stunted. Because it's that adversity, it's those hardships that mold us and grow us. That it's having to sit there in the corner when we weren't patient. That's what it takes for us to learn patience. Credit card abuse and credit abuse in general is a huge problem because as parents were raising their children in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, as credit was becoming more and more available, they did not teach discipline with that. They did not teach, or at least it wasn't learned, that we have to save up to buy something. And what they learned was, hey, if I can borrow money for it, then I'm just going to go get it and I'll worry about how to pay for it later. All right, now as many of us have learned, that model never ends well. All right, never ends well. Unless God just miraculously delivers us. And so children must learn these things, and it is a mother's responsibility along with the father's to teach them, to discipline them, and that's hard. There was a time when I was younger and when my kids were younger, I tended to lean a little bit more toward just wanting to, discipline them regularly because they just drove me nuts sometimes. But now as I get older, I find the challenge for me is not disciplining them enough. That I don't want them to go through what their older kids went through, learning different things, and I would rather just be like, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. Yeah, just go eat donuts and pizza and whatever for every meal. And so I have to be disciplined myself to teach them. And I know that's hard, and I know it takes a lot more time. The carefree, careless parent that just lets their kid do whatever, that's easy. Anybody can do that. Anybody can do that. That takes no effort, no time. But to be a parent that teaches their child, that loves them and nurtures them and disciplines them, that is very difficult. It takes a lot of time. And I think probably, I would be surprised if anyone disagreed with this. If I quit my job or jobs and I sold all my properties and just had nothing to do but be a father, I think it could be a full-time job. Even if I just had maybe 1 or 2 kids. Because it is just so intense. And it amazes me how in the summer, we are with them all the time. And we're teaching them and training them, and they kind of get halfway on the track, and then we send them off to school, and then they're with all their friends, and then they come home just wild and crazy. I don't know. And that's not I'm not putting down the school system at all. We've had a really good experience in Ozark schools. But I just think that is a great picture of how when our kids are away from us, when we're not disciplining them and training them up, they wander off of the path that they should be on. All right. Lastly, Christian character. Whenever you're a leader in anything, whether it's in your home as a parent, obviously you're a leader because you're leading your child somewhere. You're either leading them off a cliff or you're leading them to become young adults, responsible, God-fearing young adults. We can easily become so concerned with our leadership, what we're leading, what we're doing, that we forget about who we are, who we're being. And I think sometimes, in fact many times, we ignore our own personal spiritual growth and we justify it by saying, well, I'm just I'm too busy leading and serving and doing things, and I don't have time to mess with that. I don't have time to pray today. I don't have time to read my Bible. I don't have time to face this issue that I know I have in my life because all these people out here are counting on me. My children are counting on me. Church is counting on me. My job's counting on me. Husband's counting on me. And so we make excuses for why this isn't important. But just like when you're on the airplane and they do the safety check and they tell you that you should put your oxygen mask on before your child's, the reason for that is so that you're still conscious enough to put theirs on, okay? Hopefully that is apparent to you. But sometimes we get so concerned with putting the oxygen mask on everyone else that we asphyxiate. And when that happens, not only do we harm ourselves, but we harm everyone around us. And so I want to leave you, moms, with this challenge today as we close. Holiness matters. How you live your life matters. And it's really the foundation, whom you are, the essence of who you are. That's the foundation for everything you're going to teach, everything you're going to do, everything your kids are going to learn from you. That's the foundational piece. And if you mess that up, if that part's not right, the whole thing behind it's going to fall apart. And you know what? None of you are perfect. You're never going to be perfect. You're never going to be the perfect mom. And that's not really, yes, that's the goal. That's, like we said at the beginning, that's the ideal that we set out there to achieve. But at the end of the day, it's a heart issue. It's a heart issue of whether or not we are surrendered to the Lord and we have submitted ourselves to this task. Because you're not really a mother, or I don't think you're really a mother, unless you decide to be. Unless you make a decision to nurture your children and discipline and disciple them up. That's in fact where the word disciple comes from the word discipline. And train them up in the way of the Lord. And the Bible says that if we will do that, they will not depart from it. And sure, there's exceptions to that. Sure, there's parts of their lives where they may not completely learn everything we teach them. But I will tell you this. It has been my experience to this point as a parent that in the ways that I have trained my children up rightly, and I've not always done things right as a parent, but I can see the fruit in their lives as a result of that. All the pain and all the suffering, especially when they're young, you just see almost no fruit from that. But as they get older, and you catch them telling the truth whenever it's hard, or you catch them helping their brother or sister, or you see them sacrificing, you see them put their $2 in the offering plate, you see them keep a job, and you see them inviting their friends to church and bringing their friends to church, that's when it all becomes worth it. All the hardship, all the suffering, all the sleepless nights, it becomes worth it at that moment. I want to challenge you and encourage you today that God sees everything that you do. All the things that your husband doesn't appreciate, all the things that your own parents don't appreciate, that your children don't appreciate. In fact, they gripe at you and whine at you because you did those things, but you know what? God sees that. And He will bless and He will bring forward fruit from that. But we have to be faithful to plant that seed and to make those investments. And so as we pray here in just a moment, in fact, dads and others, I would just encourage you to put an arm around a mom or maybe put a hand on a shoulder just to encourage them today. As we pray, I just want to pray a prayer of strength for you, and that perhaps today maybe you are really struggling as a mom and you've never really, it just kind of happened to you and you've just been swept up in the chaos of it and you've never really made a decision to train your child up in the way they should go. I want to challenge you to make that decision today and any other decision that you have.